Hello, and thank you for joining me. So, I want to discuss a very topical issue at the moment, which is cyber activity and specifically alleged cyber abuse. There's been a number of reports about high profile figures, particularly politicians, getting abusive messages. One such person is Labour MP Dianne Abbott, who is the Shadow Home Secretary, which in British politics just means she's the opposition MP who would become the Home Secretary in an event that Labour won a general election. So she's quite a high profile MP. She's well known, um, particularly to the left. Um, I mean, her politics is particularly on the left. Firstly, I think there is something to this. I think there probably has been abusive messages. Um, because Diane Abbott is a controversial MP, she has taken positions that are controversial and she has said things that are controversial. So I have no doubt that some people took it on themselves to send abusive messages, but the problem is abusive is something of an abstract term now. Clearly, there is things that are, by the way, this has made it all the way to the human rights organization Amnesty International. I'm not sure if it's the best use of their resources, but that's that. Um, Clearly, there are things that are illegitimate. Clearly, making specific threats against someone or saying crude things that have nothing to do with the policies, like "I hope you get raped." Um, I mean, there was quotations in the news report, and if those are true, if those are accurate, that's pretty appalling. Things like "I hope she gets lynched from the nearest tree," and the fat so and so would be wouldn't fit on it. Now that is clearly disgusting, whatever you think of Diana, but those sort of comments are not constructive at all, and there's no excuse for them. No matter how strongly people feel, no matter how angry they are, comments like that are disgusting. But I'm a little bit wary about the way some of this debate is going because I feel that there are certain MPs that I mean I do think that people have responsibility because there has been violence against MPs. We know about what happened with Joe Cox last year, and there has been other examples of violence against male MPs as well, incidentally. Um, that's a point I'd just like to make. A lot of this conversation is like the abuse directed toward female MPs. Well, male MPs get abuse as well, so I don't agree with making it a gender specific thing. Obviously, male MPs aren't going to get rape threats in the same way, but it is plain not true to suggest that only female MPs get abuse. Perhaps the abuse is slightly more specific in nature in a sexist connotation. Um, but I also believe that you have to consider that when someone is a public figure, particularly a politician, they're a legislator, they're making decisions that impact other people's lives. So I think it's a little bit naive to expect that there would be no sort of dissent, and sometimes that dissent can be very angry. Now, where there are specific threats, then I do think it's legitimate that it followed up on because a threat is a threat. Um, an abusive message might not be a specific threat, they might be like, I hope you get, um, I hope this bad thing happens to you. However, saying that I hope you resign, I wouldn't call that abuse. I would call that a legitimate point of critique. I recently said that to an MP because I felt that it was Naz Shah. I've already been public about this. I'm not trolling. I've been very clear about my position. I felt that her endorsement of a tweet that shamed victims of sexual abuse was absolutely abhorrent. So, yes, I did on her timeline say, you should resign. I never made any violent threats. I never said, I hope bad things happen to you. I simply said, I think you should resign. Now, surely that is a legitimate point of dissent for someone who is an elected official who's in a position of power. And I am a little concerned that there are certain MPs, I'm not going to name names, but there are certain MPs who will use actual abuse to then try and silence legitimate criticism. Because wherever there is abuse, there is also a lot of legitimate criticism. and there has to be a situation. It's not good enough saying, "Oh well, if someone has a complaint, just come to my surgery." What if the person isn't a constituent? So I don't think that's entirely realistic. MPs know full well that people use social media nowadays. They know full well that this is a medium that people use. Um, I also think it's entirely legitimate to voice dissenting views on a political party's webpage or their Facebook page. That's very legitimate because it's not specifically against an individual. It's not like let's all pick on this individual and hate them. Again, political parties make decisions that impact people's lives. I would say that people have to be responsible for what they say, and regular citizens, we are responsible for the things that we say as well. But I find it a little galling that you have public figures who say things that are clearly provocative, and then they play the victim when it turns around. So, for instance, I mean, I'll give you the context as to why I'm making this video. I got reported on Facebook today. Now, it was a little bit irritating because I couldn't see what specifically had been reported. Now, if I'd seen what had been reported, I could reflect and think, okay, well, maybe I shouldn't have said it in that way. I can honestly, hand on heart, say I've never ever made any threats to anyone, and I've never abused anyone in the sense of saying, like, I hope this bad thing happens to you. But I have expressed arguments with people. Okay, sometimes I've perhaps been a bit more colourful than I should have been, where I fought fire with fire. Um, someone's insulted me, I've insulted them straight back. And truth be told, probably there's been times I've been less diplomatic than I should have been. But I could genuinely say I've never threatened anyone because I'm not an idiot. Why do something like that? It doesn't achieve anything and it's illegal. So why do something like that? But I found it a little bit irritating that Facebook wouldn't let me know what the context was. So now I'm thinking, well, have I been reported simply for disagreeing with someone, or have I been reported for something else? I don't know, and I think that's unfair. But anyway, it's certainly an interesting area to discuss. I think that people need to rein in on their, don't let your temper get carried away. I admit it's a mistake I've made. Sometimes I've allowed people to get under my skin on Facebook, and I fought fire with fire, whereas I should really have ignored them. But I think if you're a public figure, if you say something controversial, take for example that model Munro Bergdorf. Now she made a racist comment about all white people. It was blatantly racist in nature. I don't think anyone can rationally say it wasn't. Um, I have no doubt she's going to turn around and complain about it. Well, she already has. Again, I wouldn't advocate violence, but what on earth do you expect if you vilify an entire race? If you had a white supremacist who was a public figure and they said something derogatory about all black people, they would absolutely be receiving abusive messages. So if you're a public figure, you have a certain degree of responsibility. And if you are going to be controversial and just speak your mind, then you have to have tough enough skin to take what follows. What I would do if I were a public figure, if you don't want to read those comments, then filter them, block them. Um, but if you are a public figure and you're going to say controversial things, you can hardly be. I mean, she actually said she was surprised. I think that's complete nonsense that she was surprised by the response, as if she expected white people to be okay with being vilified. I mean, if you're a public figure and you say controversial things, you have to understand that people are going to respond to that. And yes, some people might issue threats. Most of them are nonsense. Most of them are hot air. People aren't actually going to do anything. I agree, though, that you do get nuts out there who might actually try something, so it has to be taken seriously. But I also believe that responsibility works both ways. If you're a public figure and you say something clearly inflammatory, clearly attacking an entire group, and then people, you know, respond angrily, you can't turn around and say, "Oh, poor me." You have two choices: either, put it on filter and don't respond to the comments. That way, you don't have to think about it, or accept that you have made the you have said this thing, um, And I'm not saying that it's okay to abuse people. I'm not saying it's definitely not okay to threaten people. But this is just what happens if you are a public figure and you make those sort of comments. If you demonize an entire race. Um, as for Diane Abbott, she's not squeaky clean. This is a woman who has a track record of statements that can be construed as racist themselves. So it's like Jess Phillips again, she has a track record of anti-male sexism, blatant anti-male sexism. She's essentially said that the Labour Party shouldn't select men because they are men, which is a clearly sexist position. Um, and she's been very quick to talk about misogynistic abuse. Now, I've no doubt that there are comments that are sexist in nature, and there is absolutely no justification for threatening to rape a woman, no matter who she is. It's wrong. Period. No excuses. But this responsibility works both ways. So let me know your thoughts. Summed up, I would say if you're a public figure, you need tough skin, and you need to accept that social media is the way it is. And I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm not saying that's something that people shouldn't be bothered about, but it is just the way it is. Um, and if you're going to make controversial statements that are clearly inflammatory, you have to expect what follows. I'm not saying that Diane Abbott has said anything specific. I'm just saying that her career has not exactly been controversy free. Um, so let me know your thoughts. Should people not say anything? I don't agree with that. I think that and I don't think it's enough to say, oh, you can write to their office. A lot of the time, MPs don't directly respond to messages. So the only way to get attention might be putting a comment on there. Someone recently asked me, I'd mentioned the Naz Shah thing on the Labour Party page. Someone said, oh, what has this got to do with housing? Which was the post. I said, it's got nothing to do with housing, but the point is, this is the only way the Labour Party will take any notice of it, unfortunately. So political parties are going to ignore dissent. They leave people with no choice but to voice dissent in that way. I mean, I think sometimes one of the problems of the modern era is any dissenting view is automatically seen as trolling just because it's a different point of view. So if someone leaves a negative comment on a political party's Facebook page, I don't consider that trolling unless it's specifically targeted at an individual and it's repetitive over and over and over again. But if it's a point of criticism, I think trolling's a little bit of a cop out. It might well be a legitimate point of criticism, and other avenues that you would expect them to take, oh, right to your MP, might not work because the MP in question might not be their constituent MP. And I don't think, realistically, people spend a lot more time on social media than they do on emails or letters. So social media is the biggest communication platform there is. Okay, let me know your thoughts. What do you think? What around this subject? Do you think there are limits? Do you think there are no limits? I personally think that the only real limits are if the abuse is blatantly racist or sexist or homophobic in nature, because that's aimed at a demographic. It's aimed at something that's beyond the person's control. Or if there are blatant threats, like rape threats or violent threats, etc. I've been threatened online before by some extreme people. I've mentioned this before. My views on Thailand's lèse majesté laws has attracted blatant threats. I was told that if I'm ever in Thailand, I should watch my back. So clearly there are threats out there, but simply disagreeing with someone or even expressing dissent towards someone in an angry way, like you're full of shit or you're dead wrong and this is why, I think it might not be the best way to go about it, but I don't think you can necessarily say that is abuse in the same way. Let me know your thoughts and thanks for watching.